Hello again, this is UML Operator. All right, and welcome back. This is part 2 of design, which is part of a greater multi-part series. And in this session, we're going to talk about moving from requirements through solution design into detailed design and eventually into development of code. We learned in previous sessions the 5 steps necessary to move from solution approach to high-level design. In this session, we're going to focus on the 5 steps for moving from high-level design to detailed design and even some development of some pseudocode we can pass off to developers early. So step 1 is to validate scope, nouns, and verbs. So when we're looking at business requirements and we go into specification view, we're able to look through the nouns and the verbs that are here and also filter out what is approved, not approved, and assumptions around priority and difficulty. So we're able to go through that. We go to functional requirements, we're able to see the same things. So the nouns and verbs that are here, we can filter out what is approved, what is not approved, and we can make determination as we move from solution assumptions to high-level design and then eventually into detailed design. Step 2 is to agree on systems that support the software. So as we move from the solution approach building blocks and reporting for those impacts to the design building blocks and the reporting that supports that, we start to get an idea and agree or approve the systems that are going to support the software. Step 3 is understanding existing data versus new data. In this particular case, the design architect took the requirements that were relevant to data so that they could start building out the nouns and then eventually start to define. Let's just drag and drop this one to the middle, go back to database builder in Sparx, start to define the elements, including defining the element from a description and documentation perspective, very simply through this workload. So they're able to achieve database understanding from different perspectives, whether we're looking at specification or whether we're coming back and we're looking at this from a relevance perspective. We go to relationship matrix view, look at connected, we can see that the single table as a source is realizing these at least 5 functional requirements. While we're not waiting for requirements to be done in order to achieve the objectives that we need. Step 4 is to sketch out the classes that contain operations and data. And in Sparx, we're able to drag and drop specific elements if we worked on the data into our model and start to build out our properties and our APIs and any other components that's necessary in software design. In this diagram, if we go to properties and we look at elements, we have everything inside turned off. However, at the element level, we're able to turn on what we want to see. So if we bring in another element, we can go to compartment visibility and we can say, hey, I want to see attributes, operations, and let's say we want to see tags as well. We're able to expose that during our design capabilities in order to build out our class elements necessary for project design. I'm going to go ahead and remove the data table here and just focus on the class elements, which are relevant to these applications that were in the original solution and now in the design context or block diagram. And remember, we're not coding at this particular point. We're merely using Sparx to define the properties and the elements that are necessary to achieve our objectives in design. So we're able to go through each one of these, and let's go to features over here. You can see we've identified the operations in the API that we're building, as well as any attributes that may be necessary for these particular class elements as we're going through. In this series, you've learned how to go to specific views. Let's look at specification of these elements. And you can see that we're looking at tag values as well as status to see the various applications. Here's the API we're going to be working on as we're looking at this design. So we're able to do that from a specification view. We can switch and we can go to relationship view, limit connection, and we can see the API relevant to the service exchange, various applications, and their relevance to the API or other applications that are impacted in this particular view. This leads into step 5. Define required operations and attributes, as we just discussed. So operations, here we have an attribute here in this particular class. Everything else is driven by properties in the architecture as we're going through. So the operations and the parameters would be different than attributes that are required within the code as we're going through. And we're documenting all of this. So let's go ahead, find this in our browser, make sure we're in the right place. This is close enough as long as we're in the models here. Let's just hit function key 8 here. And let's run, not high level design, let's run a canned model report, right? We're going to generate this. And this is in our report repository. And it should be done any second. And we're going to hit view. We hit view. Now we can look at this report and we can see its relevance to requirements. Right here, we continue to go down. We start to get more details on the article controller. We start getting into design. Again, high-level design. We haven't fully completed detailed design yet, but a plethora of information can be presented in report form as well as in diagram form. Once the architects reach an agreement, then we can get to a point where we're actually generating pseudocode. I don't want to call it real working source code, but pseudocode. Let's go ahead and generate. It's done just that fast. We're going to hit function key 12, and here's our documentation that we put. Here's the interface documentation for the various method invocations. And now we have pseudocode that we can start talking about and or building from as we're moving forward. Pseudocode for the architecture repository, pseudocode for the properties that support the entity framework, that's what we've chosen in this particular case. Enumerated class we have right here that's used within the KMS API during the management of knowledge articles. Here is the application DB context. So all of this can be auto-generated by Sparx Enterprise Architect and passed over to developers for code development. As the code developers are working on the code, they are exposing that code to Sparx Enterprise Architect. So we can actually go in and look at the real code that works from their repository. So here's the app DB context. This is the real code. And here is the API and the real code, right? And then there's certainly a lot more that's in here around the code in the repository, but we know that there's this code because we can actually implement it. We can then roll over to our integrated development environment. We can view the code within their repository, and we can run the code to look at the return. So here's the API being invoked and returning some sample content back. And then here is the actual user experience that is running for this code. So from a responsive web perspective, and if we were to look at it in a full browser perspective, we're seeing the code being rendered in view, including the image, and we're able to drill into an article and however big that is. And this is all test data, of course, right now, but this is real working code. Thanks very much to Sparx Enterprise Architect. And the team working with the development group in order to accomplish its objectives. All right, that's going to conclude this session. We've gone around the TOGAF ADM wheel from preliminary to architecture vision into business requirements, information system architecture, technology architecture, opportunities and solution. And then we've gone into deployment, and we continue to work in iteration around requirements management as we deliver the architecture that's necessary for the overall solution. But we're able to incrementally release as we build and deploy source code round trip around requirements from solution design and back again. All right. So I hope this session was helpful for you. We're certainly not done yet. We're going to cover some other material as we're getting into the rest of this model-driven anything. I have some more extra and learning videos coming out to show you how the secret sauce works behind a lot of this as we're working through software delivery. So, and you can deliver anything, software, a business, a souffle. All right. So thanks very much for watching. And until the next episode, happy modeling.